welcome to Let's Do Lunch. I'm Paul Sweeting, and I'm filling in at the top here today for Ned, who is temporarily detained. This is episode number 44 of Let's Do Lunch, and this being Thursday, today is the Rights Tech Roundtable. We have a very interesting discussion, at least I hope it'll be an interesting discussion, queued up for you today with folks from Bitfury Surround, which is a company I've sort of been watching from afar for a while, and I'm very happy to, very excited to have Stefan Schultz on here today. Before we get to that, a couple of housekeeping things. At the bottom of your Zoom screen there, you will see an icon for Q&A. If you have any questions for myself or for the panelists, you can put them. You can type them into the Q&A queue. There's also a chat window that you can open, and we encourage people to chat along as they're watching. Please identify yourself and where you're from or what company you're representing, and we've had some pretty engaged chats on these before. One point to emphasize: if you do have a question, please do not put it in the chat window because we might miss it as it goes by. If you do have a question that you'd like me to put to one of the panelists, please put it in the Q&A queue. Also, at the bottom of the chat window, there's a little drop down. Make sure to set it to all panelists and attendees so everybody can see. With that, let's get going with the Rights Tech Roundtable. Before we start our discussion, I wanted to flag a couple of items in the news, as we typically do here at the top. One of which is kind of bizarre, because it involves lupine erotica, and rather kinky lupine erotica at that, which is not a topic we would typically cover here at the Rights Tech Roundtable, but this involves a dispute that has arisen within a particular subgenre of fan fiction, or what is essentially fan fiction. It's fan fiction, a category known as the Omegaverse, and it originally was an outgrowth of the CW TV show Supernatural. But it has gone on to develop in sort of its own directions, and it has developed its own standard themes and tropes and stock characters, and is an extremely vibrant area of what is essentially what it has, for the most part, been amateur fan fiction. But recently, some of the writers, some of the more popular writers in that world, have begun to try to commercialize what they're doing, and have published or self-published some of their work. And a dispute has arisen between, in fact, litigation has now arisen between two of the writers, where one is claiming to have been copied by the other. And it's raised a lot of interesting sort of legal questions around what is copyrightable within what is essentially a commons, where you have sort of standard tropes, standard themes, almost set piece scenes that recur from work to work. How much of that is original? Can you copyright it? And can somebody be held liable for infringement? So it's an interesting thing. It's somewhat related to issues that could arise within user-generated content, because that's essentially what this is. It's a giant commons of user-generated content, and the rules are not clear. Another interesting news story that I wanted to touch on just because it is relevant to today's discussion, and that is that last week the U.S. Copyright Office finally issued its long-delayed, keenly awaited report on the operation and effectiveness of Section 512 of the Digital Millennium Copyright Act. That is the section that spells out the safe harbors for online service providers, shielding them, conditionally shielding them from liability for infringement, copyright infringement committed by users. And it's been a point of dispute and debate between technology providers and copyright owners for a long time. The safe harbors were an attempt to create a sort of balance between the equities of each. But the Copyright Office has come out and said that it believes that the balance originally intended by Congress has gone awry and is now sort of tilted against rights owners, and they are making some recommendations for Congress to make some, what the office refers to as fine-tuning of Section 512 to try to bring the balance back into line. And we're going to be discussing today some issues related to the sort of balance of power between rights owners and online service providers. And we're going to be doing that with our two guests today, if they would be so kind as to join me now. Stefan Schultz and Fabian Alsultany. Did I get that right, Fabian?
Hello. Well done.
Stefan is the co-founder and CEO of Bitfury Surround. He's based in Germany. I forget exactly where.
Yeah, Berlin.
Berlin. But his background, Bitfury is essentially a crypto technology company. But his background is mostly in the music business. He spent 20 years in the business, working for Universal Music and Vivendi. He was one of the founders of Universal Mobile, which was Vivendi's mobile music division. For a while, he also worked at Universal Music's digital business group within Europe, and he's also, and this is something I didn't know about him, and I'm kind of curious about it. That he in 2016 he joined forces with Simon Fuller to create the first global pop group based entirely on social media. Which I hope I get a chance to ask him about. Fabian is the Director of Business Development for North America for Bitfury Surround. He too has been working in the music industry for many years. He was, before he joined Bitfury Surround, which was when, Fabian?
Officially on the 1st of April. It's just been 2 months.
Okay, so he's still a little wet behind the ears within Surround. But before joining Bitfury, he was Director of Business Development at the blockchain platform Chain Cooperative, which is how I first met him. He's attended some rights tech conferences in the past, and we're happy to have them both. Thanks so much for joining us, guys.
Thank you very much, Paul.
So, Stefan, let me start with you. I'm not sure how familiar folks here in attendance might be with Bitfury. Can you just quickly summarize sort of who Bitfury is and why it decided to launch Surround?
Yeah, so Bitfury is essentially a large mining, Bitcoin mining corporation and an integrated service provider for the Bitcoin blockchain mostly. So they have been around for like 10 years, since 2009, 2010, 11 years. and they operate with mining centers all over the world, and mostly in cost-effective, energy places like in Norway, for example, Iceland, North America, Canada, so basically, as the mining business for cryptocurrencies, in this case for the Bitcoin, is kind of coming to an end one day. It was going to be like probably 2042, where it is definitely going to be less profitable than it is today. That puts a lot of pressure, of course, on upcoming business models in this sector, and mostly. The belief is that in the future there is a whole network of blockchains, and there will be, like in infrastructures and in verticals and tokenized economies, to which they would then essentially, diversify into, and then operate more in the software and in the processing business of running, data networks. And that's how we got together, and that's when they decided to go into this IP route.
And is Surround, is IP their first effort at diversification beyond Bitcoin mining, or have there been others?
No, there have been others, but mostly around identity projects, security projects, several projects around the world, mainly with governments and with security focus. And then also they have tried and worked on several AI projects, because there's a big AI unit now that was just announced a couple of months ago, and this is like Surround is the first project that they started that is really dedicated in an entire vertical. So it's not only it's dedicated a single project in one country with one operating company, but this is more like an infrastructure vertical play. They have also, started a software unit about 3-4 years ago, and of course we can utilize their technology and several components of this technology and customize this for our.
So what's the specific goal with Surround? What is Surround attempting to achieve?
Yeah, so basically, I had the idea to do Surround and started Surround based on the obvious, I would say, necessity to strengthen the asset class, intellectual property, that I've been working in for like almost 30 years, 25 years. Been working with IP. Understanding that the value gap that we are all talking about, and that we see that is really becoming a valley. I mean, I've been in this business with only in digital. I mean, it has become a valley in the last 10 years. It's crazy. That there is a strong necessity of building some kind of a data play, a platform play that is not only allowing to establish some workflows that are up to date with the data economy, but at the same time also provide, let's say, some kind of precondition to the individual asset holders really to authoritatively manage their commercial affairs. So it's all about, in my mind, it was about data consistency. It was about a level playing field to the data economy, and to have some commercial, I would say, independence, if you will, in any direction, to really strengthen this asset class.
Yeah, and we're going to drill down on that. But before we do, so Fabian, Surround is is fairly recently expanded into the U.S. I mean, they've appointed you, but they weren't around much in North America until recently. What is the sort of business plan here? Who are you attempting to reach out to? Are you, what is the business development roadmap at this point, at least in North America?
I think presently there's a few verticals that I'm working on. One of which is having a handful of conversations with different music technology companies. If we as we're building out these two verticals within the company, which is number one, a copyright control center, which would allow us to, a songwriter to see their song, identify their splits, allow for those splits to take place automatically in the future, not just yet, but once those deals are in place with the DSPs, we'll be able to cross that bridge. And number two, to be able to utilize the variety of assets that are associated with those songs, be it stems, digital collectibles of the band, video, any instance in where one can monetize a digital asset and the ability to be able to push that through our music tech companies that we're building into our music marketplace. There will be an opportunity here where there'll be a suite of products and a suite of technologies that will allow for artists and the stakeholders of songs to monetize every single digital asset that they've created. So the big play right now, the conversations are really music tech companies. And additionally, I think on a strategic level, we're in conversations with a handful of the music tech VCs and bigger investment companies within the music space, as we want to have those strategic alliances for the long term. You know, there's a pretty
So you're doing that before you're actually reaching out to labels, publishers, and
yeah, I mean, I think the conversation for publishers, it's they're happening just because we're in the mix and people are starting to reach out to have those conversations. But the real goal right now is to have this basic marketplace in place when we launch our beta, come around Q3, Q4, and when we land in Q1 of 2021, the more public, more robust platform will be ready for prime time for folks to start using. And over the next 3 to 5 years, really, when the dream of what the blockchain is supposed to do to allow for automated payments to be taking place on a monthly, weekly, or even daily level, depending on the deals that are structured with the various DSPs, that's really where the game is going to change for the economy for musicians around the world.
Fabian, I'm sorry, Stefan, you mentioned before the evolution of the data economy. When you mention data in the music industry, a lot of people's first thought goes to what is essentially metadata, data about ownership and credits and so forth, which is obviously important to make sure the right people get paid and the right people get credited for the use of their work. But what you're talking about really is data about the performance of the core assets of the industry, yep, the copyrights in the marketplace. So yes, why is that?
It's important? it's basically, I mean, if I go back like in 2001, 2002, I don't know if you all remember how Vivendi was like playing hugely in this data place, trying to combine networks at that time, which was this huge vis-a-vis project, for example, that went bust because it was just too early. Combining like the networks and the content and everything. You basically, ever since that time, we've been pushing hard for monetization of the assets. If most of the time, the labels in our case, that we didn't have any rights, right? Because nobody knew really what was this good for, what is a ringtone, how does this work? Nobody. So basically, we were like very, very active, exploring in the marketplace without even knowing who owns what ourselves, and then eventually, of course, distributing with more or less pressure from lawyers, artists, and all this, like the entire market. Now, the good thing about that time was that there was so much value created by really going aggressively into this platform economy and fighting for the value. And of course, somewhat blackmailing, like Nokia, Ovi, and all these guys, putting a lot of pressure on them. They wanted the content that they need to pay for sure. But one thing is good, at that time, everybody was really focused on how can we monetize, how can we do things, how can we diversify, not very focused on one specific use case, and the whole commercial development was very, very active, right? And then still there was a lot of dispute in the value chain with the publishing companies and everybody. But what I can clearly see right now is that this focus, that is if you look at it from a Google perspective, Facebook perspective, the big platforms perspective, there is an unlimited focus of monetizing any single data point, right, in this industry. And the value in these data points is not only in the asset, but it's in how the asset is being dealt with and how it's mitigated between a consumer, for example, and some audience, you know, like an audience and their customer. Most cases, many cases, an advertising company. In the case of a symmetry model, like for example in Netflix, you have a customer and a consumer. I mean, the consumer and your business partner is the same because you have a subscription, which
Right.
is the same in Spotify. But basically, what I see is, first of all, the capabilities of coming to a similar level that they have in the perfection of how to use and monetize these data points is something that we have to get to, right? So the commercial environment in which we live right now is so fragmented and it's still so delayed, and there is so much, you know, I would say inconsistencies in everything, that in order to operate on eye level with somebody like Google, we have to wire our I would say our processes in a complete different way. And along the lines of now the enterprise productivity trends, if you look at Salesforce, if you look at DocuSign, if you look at Zoom, if you look at Dropbox, on and on and on, there's probably another 400 billion in value that has been created in creating platforms that optimize workflows. That is something that we really believe needs to be done for the music industry, and this is why I think if you really go hard into the market and you find a way to monetize these data points and to understand how the assets really develop their value, and you can do that in real time. In the future, it will be real time. You know, that means, in my opinion, this is how you unleash the real value of what we are all talking about.
So in your view, there's a value in music assets, intellectual
Yes.
property assets, that is yet to be unlocked, and that the growth that we've seen in the business in the last couple of years, which, you know, has been encouraging. At least it's better than it was a decade ago when value was being destroyed, basically. But you think there's still a lot of value in there that is yet to be unlocked, and
yes. I actually almost disagree with you, because I think there is a huge dilution happening right now. We have more and more content coming in. There's still a lot of permission based entries into the market. But if you just imagine all the creativity of the world coming into the markets, and then you look at our 3%, 4%, 8%, 6%, I mean, on a basis of 29 billion, just imagine, right? Even throughout COVID, we're talking about a slight moderate growth, and you know, Goldman Sachs is already giving some, I mean, I would say some adjustments. At the same time, just as we speak this year, the average growth of the data platforms was almost, you know, 40% on a 2,000 billion level. So this gives you a perspective of, you know, you have COVID, more and more people watch television, more and more, I mean, like watch movies and TV series and all this kind of stuff. More and more people listen to music. The value is like kind of on a comparable basis to what the data economy is doing, really, really small. And it's not even growing that fast. And the data economy is booming like crazy, right? So this is one of the things where I would say it looks very strongly as if we are underperforming compared to what's going on out there, and the relative importance and significance of the content assets that are flying out there in the market.
When we you made reference to the value gap, or the value valley, I guess, as you now call it. You know, as we discussed earlier when we were preparing for this session, there's a real information asymmetry between rights owners, creators on the one hand, and platforms that are you know, driven by their data management. And of course, information asymmetries distort markets. So would it be fair to say that to some extent, the value gap or valley is a function of the information asymmetry rather than, or at least perhaps in addition to whatever asymmetries may exist legally with respect to you know, content piracy and things of that nature.
Yeah, definitely. But it's also an infrastructure issue. Because the way that the processes are wired and the way that the let's say, I think the value creation works and the allocation works right now is not very efficient. So that you also needs to be considered, right? So you have several components in here. And I think the whole business processes are not streamlined, obviously. That's why we have so much dispute. And at the same time, you know, the data is inconsistent in most of the cases, and there is no such a thing as a, you know, like as kind of a, you know, combined data hub under which you can easily create, let's say, a fast business opportunity, and then operate like a platform rather than, you know, I have to go to this guy and then the guy has to go to this guy and we have to do this and then we have to check this. I mean, it's almost impossible to unfold your full value if you compare to the speed of the other, you know, of the market out there.
So Fabian, is that, you know, is what we were just talking about sort of the focus of your conversations right now with other stakeholders in the ecosystem?
I think at the end of the day, it's about driving more value onto the IP of music, the videos, and the brand, and all the new technology suites that we're, one, creating within the company, and two, the partnerships that we're doing with the other technology companies that will be integrated into this marketplace umbrella that we're creating, which will then allow for everyone to start making more money off of their songs. Ultimately, if an artist is able to say, I've released my album, I can keep track of it through the platform, I could recognize how much money I should be deriving from the platforms, I can put my stems out there, I could distribute my virtual t-shirts onto a VR platform. There are so many possibilities where the future of the music industry is going because of the technologies that are being made available right now, and the suite of technologies that we have at our fingertips over at Bitfury, that, you know, essentially we're just in the process of just dreaming up and creating the future based on the relationships that we have and the technology suites that we have available to us.
So to either of you, Fabian, you of course have a background in blockchain. What does that particular technology, you know, bring to the table here? Why blockchain in order to do what you're trying to do? What can you do with that technology that you cannot do with you know, ordinary database technology?
I mean, basically, there are several, you know, I would say components or several answers to this. So first of all, you don't actually need blockchain in order to do a streamlined business platform, for example, and to do what we essentially want to do. So that would be, for example, you know, the biggest component would be like a software as a service platform for productivity, just like you've seen, like I was mentioning before, Salesforce and all these guys. So that's one thing. However, if you want to get it going on the basis of trust, you know, and interoperability, and it requires a lot of trust, because otherwise, in this lightning speed, you will not be able to you know, follow what the others are doing, especially if you have a collaborative product. So few people know each other, but do not necessarily trust each other, which is true for the music market. That is actually where cloud, you know, services have their limits, right? So similar to what IBM is now, you know, suggesting, that you put on top of these cloud services or below these cloud services a blockchain component, would basically mean that you have somewhere an anchor for the truth, right? You can always go back to, that you can refer to, that you cannot change, you cannot alter. It's not sitting in some you know, data warehouse that belongs to somebody. But it's essentially open in our case, by the way, too, because we don't own it. It's going to be like open source wise. You can just check out on the Bitcoin blockchain anytime, or on these nodes where you have some nodes, you can check any transaction every day. Right?
So you wouldn't own the platform that you're looking to build here.
We would own the platform because we are a commercial unit, but what we would not own is the information and is the underlying data structure, because that is, as you know, it's distributed all over the world. In our case, it's Bitcoin blockchain. It's very solid. So yeah, so that's why blockchain is potentially, blockchain gives you capabilities like combining databases. You have 200 collecting societies, for example. You overlap these collecting societies' data. You have some kind of a layer up there that just captures and synchronizes this data that could be stale in one way or the other on one of those 200 different databases. And that what happens is through this blockchain component, you lock them in at the same time, and it gives you some sort of a consistency in the overlapping data structures, for example. And then there is another thing that is, of course, the way that you interoperate with each other. So if you were talking about smart contracts, so you put lightning fast contracts at speed that are industry specific into the system, then all of a sudden, you can actually process allocation processes and monetization at a much higher speed, and you can distribute it. You can distribute the value up to 100 people, 100,000 people.
One of the I don't want to say criticisms, but one of the issues with respect to blockchain has been its scalability and its speed. It's kind of, it's a depending on what consensus mechanism is being used, it can have a slow processing throughput, and there have been questions about its scalability. Is that not an issue here as far as you're concerned?
It's not an issue because we are actually building a second layer technology on top of it, right? So that means that, in essence, the scalability part and the speed of the blockchain, especially if you now speak about, for example, the Bitcoin blockchain, right, as opposed to Ethereum and other blockchains, is actually very good, because it's a real ideal network should be completely stupid in the middle, and it should become intelligent in the ends. That is a very, very well-known theory, because it's robust, it never changes, it's very, very hard to break, as you know. Bitcoin blockchain has never been broken. So or let's say not ever since 8 years or something, when in the beginning, of course, they were breaking it for fun. But the point is that the scalability here is not an issue, because we are building a second layer on top that is then just anchoring and mirroring to that blockchain. So that means that if you come back every hour or every 10 minutes or every 20 minutes, whatever, you will always go back, like in a time capsule from Apple, you will always go back to the status 10 minutes ago. And it's not about processing every single transaction. It is about processing an image and mirroring every 10 minutes or every minute or so. And in order to do that, we can now do 100,000 transactions per second, which is already pretty strong. You can 75% or so of the streaming in Germany, in Europe, and in the US. So it's not so bad, but it's not even needed, because most of the stuff is done on the second layer. Yeah. So that means in case there is the core blockchain would break, then the second layer would not be able to retrieve the data from 10 minutes ago, and it would all break, right? And this is where Bitfury, for example, is very, very strong, because they have all these processing powers and all the data centers that run such a network on top of it. So that's the catch a little bit here. Otherwise, it would be a very difficult task.
And I think specifically, just to address it, Bitfury built out their own blockchain system called Exonum. So that Exonum system is able to do over 100,000 transactions a second presently. And when, in blockchain terms, I would say it's probably the fastest blockchain in terms of transaction volume that exists out there.
Yeah.
We're coming up on our deadline here. We do have a poll, an audience poll that Laura, maybe you could throw up if you're still there, or maybe I could. I just wanted to get a sense from the audience about what their expectations are with respect to, can everybody see the poll? You guys see the audience poll? Oh, there it is. I just wanted to get a sense of people's expectations about growth in the music business over the next few years. So we put up a couple of questions about that. While people are filling that out, let me ask a couple of questions. We also have some questions from the audience, but before we get to those, we've been talking about the technology. We've been talking about the data. Let's talk about sort of where this all starts, which is creative artists who write songs, record music, perform music. What do they get out of building this sort of infrastructure that you guys are trying to build? Is there some concrete material way you can point to that an artist benefits from or would benefit from this sort of infrastructure?
Yes, most definitely, because the first step really is to put all your things, have the capability of putting things, all the things that are relevant for your commercial business into one place, right? But it's not in a centralized way. It's I mean, like from a technical perspective, but it's really like going and more like an aggregation of the data. So the metadata, for example, and the creative data that you put into one place, where you can then get access to a immutable ledger that basically records and that basically runs with you all the time across all the different data sources that you're pulling into the system. So that means it's kind of a CCTV camera that you will be receiving that protects you, and that allows you to basically write down everything every 10 minutes, every 20 minutes, every minute in the future. And you can always go back in time, and then you can compare your data input, the data sources coming from labels, coming from publishing, coming from streaming services and other business partners. And you can always go back, and the system will find inconsistencies for you. You can see them yourself. You have your stuff in one place. And from there, you would be able then to interact on the marketplace with apps and with partners that you already know. But this time it works in the way that they connect to your APIs, so to speak, and both parties would be on the same level with regards to the data that they see and that they operate on. So
one of the things I think, yeah. I'm sorry, please finish.
No, it's essentially a security suite first. So it will give you your IP assets in one place. At the same time, it makes sure that nobody can actually play with the data, and it's always been recorded. You can always retrieve it. Even 100 years from now, you can retrieve it, right? And you are authoritative with your assets, and you are independent from that respect before you start your journey for the 70 years plus your lifetime, of course.
One of the things I found interesting in poking around on your website and so forth is that you're envisioning an infrastructure and an artist, at least from the artist perspective, that would essentially integrate with whatever label deals, publishing deals, co-publishing deals that they already have. So you're not looking to disrupt those relationships. You're
no. Not at all. They will, the disruption, if there is a disruption, it's going to happen because the asymmetries will be evened out, but just by the nature of looking at the data, right? So you iterate on the data. So if you see that you can get better data, or you can get better commercial results if you run on with different partners, that's another story, right? But we will not. We are completely integrative to existing registries, to existing data sources and stuff like that. So that's we are not replacing that. We are just giving you as an artist the opportunity, and the labels and the publishers the opportunity to run their asset, to run the value creation of their assets and the lifetime of their assets, the commercial lifetime, the valuation. For example, valuation based on data is completely different as valuation based on some paper, this kind of fate you can put in your own hands. And we believe that is a very, very strong requirement in order to create your commercial career. And in the case of, for example, if you look at Fortnite or these gamers, they understand that so well because they iterate on their data. And the artists should be, and the creators and the labels and the publishers should be able to really do the same thing, iterate on their data for business.
I wanted to get to some of the audience questions. We have a few. And some of them we've sort of covered. Eric Mendelson asks, what are your thoughts regarding how rights on blockchain can immediately impact the music industry, which is currently monetized on centralized platforms like Spotify, Apple, Deezer? I guess I guess he's asking sort of what could the short-term impact be rather than a long-term. Is there a short-term play here where blockchain would make a significant difference?
I think yes, but in a different way. So it's not just the presence of of a blockchain infrastructure that is going to create a huge business. It's the way how it interacts with the business modules, right? And you can also go completely wild, and you can say that this is what some of the hardliners say. If you open up all the data in all directions, then all of a sudden, your business will explode, because this level of transparency has never happened. And if you just give nobody any chance to hide, then potentially, you could explode in this business. But I'm a little bit careful with this, because I think it's very sensitive, and it also can distort the markets in the sense that it will allow the big data, the big IP owners to withdraw. So in my view, it's more about understanding, implementing, for example, zero knowledge proof contracts. That means you can keep your competition, but that's legitimate, right? So everything that's happening is legitimate, but you do not necessarily see the inside of the contract between Universal and Taylor Swift, for example, right? You can start with things like that, and that will already stimulate, because people understand the legitimacy of things, but without disclosing everything fully and making it completely open, right? But things like that could, I think, in essence, the arrival of a data consistency tool, and the arrival of, let's say, of kind of a hard drive that follows your career, is already giving you a lot of comfort, and it will then provide you a much stronger basis to really take business decisions in a more, I would say, authoritative and more secure way. So I think it's more going to be a gradual impact, but it's definitely going to be significant also already in the next 2-3 years, for sure.
Related question, sort of related question from Anonymous. Essentially what he or she is asking is that this is Surround is not the first blockchain company to come along in the music business. There are people who are already using or attempting to use blockchain to track data and monetize stems and digitized assets and so forth. And any, are they all doing it wrong and you've got it right, or is there something different about what you guys are doing or trying to do?
So different. It's so difficult. I mean, Fabian, you want to say something about this?
Well, I think the marketplace is going to play a huge role in all of this. I think our the technologies, again, the technology suites that we have available to us through Bitfury play a considerable role. And I think really everybody's got their relationships. Everyone's at a similar starting line. Everyone is building out new technologies, and a lot of the relationships that we've established over our decades of relationships and being in the business, I think, are going to play into where this is all going to go. But it's really technology suites, the power of what we've got with our parent company, and we're just going to have to see where the ship leads over the next few years.
I think it's super important to understand that technology itself is not going to, I mean, a hammer is not going to build a house, So the blockchain itself, in essence, it's not what makes the business. So, it's really the overall concept, and we were just speaking about it before. We're about, let's say, a vertical productivity suite that is more comparable to Salesforce and these guys, that has a blockchain anchor. Because that is the thing. If you interact in between people that know each other and that even collaborate with each other and they don't trust for whatever reason, then I think this anchoring piece is extremely important. That's why also I could convince Bitfury to go into this, because all our market research showed that this is a very, very, I would say, suitable vertical for this kind of plugin or for this kind of piece that you would need to be attached to. But it's not, in essence, the blockchain itself that is surround.
I want to put up the results of the poll here in a second, but one, I guess, a business development question for Fabian here. What is the strategy with regards to major labels versus indies? Is there a distinction in how you would be approaching those two sectors of the market?
I think it's really just one-on-one conversations, relationships, presenting what we're doing and allowing those entities to see what we're creating and to get them excited. I mean, everything is on relationships. Everything's based on what we're creating. And if our partners are able to recognize the vision of what it is that we're making and we can prove that it works, which we're doing quite well with that, the future should work out quite well for the company.
So I'm going to publish the results of the poll here. First, I'm going to end polling. And we asked folks, what are your expectations for growth in the business over the next 2 years? And the plurality of folks, just under 50%, say they expect faster growth. And a little over a quarter expect, well, the rest are fairly evenly distributed between slower growth and continued at the current rate of growth. Nobody thinks we're going to get into any sort of negative growth situation. Oh, I forgot to share them. There we go. Can everybody see them? And which sectors do you expect to show the most growth over the next couple of years? And this is a little bit surprising. Most people think the largest percentage think the recorded music segment is where most of the growth will happen, as opposed to music publishing or live performance. Live performance is sort of sui generis at the moment, since you can't really have live performances and may not for quite some time. And just under a quarter of people think all sectors will see the growth. And we have a lot of blockchain enthusiasts in the audience today. We asked, how comfortable would you be relying on blockchain technology to track usage and royalty data? And a majority 54% said they'd be very comfortable, and another 30% said somewhat comfortable. So overwhelming comfort with the idea of blockchain becoming a part of the business infrastructure of the music industry. So that's really interesting. I suspect there's a certain amount of self-selection in the audience going on there. I'm not sure how projectable those results are, but that's quite interesting. We're just out of time here. Either of you guys have any final closing thoughts before we sign off?
Just grateful that you created the space for us to come and share what we're doing with your audience. Thank you, Paul.
Yeah, I really appreciate it, Paul. It's been a pleasure.
Well, I really appreciate you guys joining us. We'll be back next week with another Rights Tech Roundtable. And tomorrow, let's do lunch. We'll stick with the music theme. It is the Business of Music Day, and the topic will be music production in the cloud, and which is also something of a data challenge. And it will feature Norman Arnold, Creative Director of AMI Music Group, Elliot Sakhartov, I'm probably butchering that, Technology Strategist at Microsoft, and UK recording artist Henry Dennis. So tune in tomorrow, same bad time, same bad channel. Thanks so much, guys.
Great. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Bye-bye.